The desert sun hung low, casting long shadows over the cracked earth, where a solitary figure knelt beside a fallen horse. Nantan's dark eyes, sharp as an eagle's, met the glazed gaze of the cowboy sprawled beneath her, blood seeping slow and heavy into the cold ground. Silence stretched taut, broken only by the dry whistle of the wind and the ragged breaths of the wounded man. An unspoken tension hovered between them, fragile as a whispered plea in the vast emptiness. Around them, the desert bore its harsh testament. Endless stretches of ochre sand and jagged rocks baked under an unforgiving sun. The air was dry and hot, carrying the scent of dust, creosote bushes, and faded memories burned into the land. Far-off mountains stood like silent sentinels under a bruised sky, their jagged edges piercing the horizon. The oppressive heat pressed upon Nantan's skin, even as the shadow of dusk promised a chilly night to come. Nantan stood motionless a moment longer, the weight of her people's history etched deep in her heart. Memories rose unbidden, raids, broken promises, and the relentless encroachment of colonists on sacred lands. Each scar in her mind mirrored the scars on this stranger's body. She felt the old anger simmer, but beneath it, a solemn code whispered, louder, mercy in the face of suffering. Years of mistrust and battles whispered warnings, yet here she was, balanced on the knife's edge between vengeance and compassion. The destiny of her ancestors and the survival of her own spirit tangled in this single choice. The cowboy's shallow breaths pulled her back to the present. His worn fingers twitched weakly, grasping at the dust. To help him was to risk everything: discovery by hostile men, the unraveling of fragile peace, and possibly death. Yet leaving him here was an act of cruelty that her soul could not abide. The dilemma churned within Nantan. Was this stranger enemy, victim, or something in between? The decision was hers alone, and the echoes of her people's pain weighed heavy on her resolve. Slowly, Nantan moved, her hands steady, despite her pounding heart. She tore a strip of cloth from her leather satchel, dampened it with water gathered from a nearby gully, and pressed it to the man's deep side wound. Every motion carried the tension of a silent negotiation, mercy leaning in against suspicion. He flinched at first, suspicion flickering in his blurry eyes, but she held firm, a steady presence carved from resilience and wisdom. The desert seemed to lean closer, as if holding its breath. The fragile calm shattered suddenly. On the horizon, dust clouds roiled and dark forms appeared. Pistoleros, their horses pounding the dry earth, weapons gleaming ominously in the fading light. The sound of hooves grew louder, sharp cries slicing the stale air. Nantan's jaw tightened. Time fractured. Every second stretched taut like a bowstring. Her act of mercy had stirred a hornet's nest, and now the shadows closed in fast. Many companions who walk these forgotten trails tell us how fate, or the fickle algorithm of YouTube, sometimes erases their subscriptions without a warning. Before the next perilous path unfolds and another twist twists this story, have a quick look below the video and make sure you're still enlisted in our. And so you don't lose the thread, we don't want you to miss a single voice echoing from this valley. Check your subscription now and join our saga. Nanton moved swiftly, her fierce eyes scanning the jagged rocks that rose like silent sentinels under the bruised twilight. The desert air chilled now, sharp and biting, tugging at her dark hair as she led the wounded cowboy through a narrow crevice she knew well. A hidden refuge, carved by time and nature itself. Eli, his breaths shallow and uneven, leaned heavily against her as they reached a shallow cave, masked by thorny desert brush and the dancing shadows of dusk. She lowered him gently onto a bed of scraggly dry grass she'd gathered earlier, the rough fibers pressing into his blood-slicked shirt. Silence fell between them, thick with unspoken suspicion. His eyes fluttered open, meeting hers with a wary glaze as if measuring friend from foe in the dimming light. Nanton said nothing. Words were fragile on lips untested by trust. Instead, she knelt beside him, her hands skilled and deliberate, peeling back torn fabric to tend to a deep gash marring his ribs. Eli winced, a sharp sting lancing through him, yet he held still, surrendering to the care that was as foreign as the desert dawn. The wound was deep, infected with grit and dust from the fall, but Nantan's touch was gentle, precise, half medicine, half quiet mercy. She pulled clean water from a hide pouch, dabbing at the rag as she murmured a blessing beneath her breath. Ancient words carried by the wind, spoken for the living and the lost alike. As she worked, their eyes locked again. In the dim cave light, Eli saw not a savage nor an enemy, but a woman burdened by pain older than the land itself. And Nanton glimpsed the weight on Eli's shoulders, a man trapped in a world that had little room for mercy. This fragile alliance between two strangers, stitched together by wounds and silence, formed amidst a desert that remembered every betrayal. A sudden snap outside, the crunch of gravel under boot heels, made Nanton freeze. She raised a finger to her lips, signaling Eli to remain still. The group of pistoleros they had glimpsed before were close now, their voices low but urgent, murmuring like vultures circling a carcass. The eerie quiet of the cave was shattered by the echo of determined boots. Nanton's mind raced, calculating the slim margin between life and death. Discovery meant certain doom, not only for Eli, but for herself. Yet to abandon him here was unthinkable. Slowly, she gestured for him to keep silent, squeezing his hand, a lifeline forged from tenuous trust. Outside, harsh voices drifted in. One pistolero's gravelly tone pierced the dusk. Tracks here. Fresh. Someone's been hiding. The words struck like lead against Nanton's ribs. She could feel Eli's pulse tremble beneath her palm, fragile and desperate. Her eyes darted to the cave entrance's narrow slit. Through it, she saw the hazy silhouette of a man kneeling, bent to the earth in search of signs, a hunter's gaze sharp as any rifle aim. The pistolero swept his gaze methodically, his fingers tracing the dust, tracing paths only she and the desert knew. The silence contracted, swallowing breath and daring. Eli's face paled, veins dark beneath. His skin, his jaw worked, a silent plea emerging in a hoarse whisper. Go, go without me. But Nanton shook her head, fierce and resolute. This was no time for surrender. Minutes passed like heavy stones, punctuated only by distant hoofbeats, fading, then regaining strength around the perimeter. The hunter's boots pressed closer, their words now tinged with frustration and warning. Nantin's grip tightened around the makeshift rag she had fashioned, her eyes hardening with the resolve of the mountain itself. She would not let this moment slip into oblivion. Memories flashed unbidden, raids passed, and broken promises whispered between shifting sands. Yet beneath the weight of ancient wounds, a fragile new seed pushed upward, the possibility of something beyond endless conflict. In the quiet between heartbeats, Nantin found a sliver of hope, a whispered promise not only to Eli, but to herself and her people. As the pistoleros scanned the vicinity, one among them straightened suddenly, a sneer twisting his face. He moved towards the cave's mouth, eyes narrowing as he caught sight of a faint disturbance. The crushed leaves, the faint drag marks pressed into the earth. His voice sliced through the desert air. "Look here, signs they were hidden not long ago. Could be a trap." Nantin's breath caught. Desperation pooled in her chest like quicksilver. She pressed herself flat against the uneven stone wall, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Eli's shallow breathing echoed the storm inside her. Each second, a verdict. The hunters began to fan out, speaking in clipped tones of searching shadows and the unforgiving promise of capture. The desert held its breath. The night air thickened, like a shroud over the fragile sanctuary. Time, constricted to the point of snapping. Nantin's stare locked once more with Eli's, a silent vow passing between them. As long as breath filled their lungs, they would resist the darkness closing in. Her fingers brushed his brow, a fleeting touch of comfort in a world that offered little. But fate's cruel hand was swift. The pistolero who had discovered the trails now lifted a piece of torn cloth, caught on a thorn. Recognition flickered in his eyes, a fragment of evidence that could expose them. The fragile refuge was no longer secret. Their silence, until now a shield, thinned under the weight of coming storm. Outside, the dying light of day bled into shadows, and the hunter's presence crept ever closer, drawn by tracks that whispered of hidden lives. Nantin's hand found his once more. "Stay quiet," she breathed. "For now, we wait." But the web was closing in. One hunter stood bending low, eyes sharp on the disturbed earth. "They've been here, we're close." The desert held its breath, and the fragile line between mercy and peril trembled on the edge. The revelation struck. The pistoleros had found traces. Taina's boots crunched over the scattered stones as she approached the hidden cleft, her gaze sharp and guarded. The desert twilight kissed the horizon with bruised purple hues, shadows lengthening between the jagged rocks. She halted just beyond the cave's mouth, sensing a fragile tension hanging in the cool air. Inside, the faint rustle of movement stirred her suspicion. Nantin's choice to shelter Eli, the wounded cowboy, was a defiant act that clashed with the wary blood that ran through Taina's veins. Inside the shelter, Nantin's steady hands worked in whispered rhythm, cleansing the cuts that marred Eli's flesh. His breath was shallow but persistent, his dark eyes flitting between discomfort and something darker. a guarded wariness that matched Taina's. When Taina finally stepped into the flickering light of the fire, her presence was a blade, slicing through the fragile silence. "You risk everything for a stranger?" Taina's voice cut sharp, steeped in doubt and the hardened certainty of a warrior's instinct. "He is not one of us. You know what his kind brings. Pain and shame." Nantan met her sister's fierce stare without flinching. "He is a man hurt and afraid. What are we if not human first? The land does not judge, not as blindly as men do. Mercy is not a weakness." Taina's hands curled into fists, her gaze flickering towards Eli, who lay limp with pain. "And what secrets does he carry? What fire may he spark among the already smoldering embers between our people and theirs?" Her voice dropped, a spark of prophecy veiled by skepticism. Eli, stirring, struggled to sit upright, his voice hoarse and low. "The truth I carry isn't a burden I choose, but one that burns sharp. They want me found because I know what they'll do next. A war is coming, against your people, against all who stand in their way." The weight of his confession fell into the silent canyon between them, as Taina's eyes narrowed. "Then you are more dangerous than any bullet, and if they capture you," her stare sharpened, "the fires will consume us all." Nantan glanced toward the narrow cave entrance, where the last light of day bled out. "That is why we protect him, because if they take him, the devastation won't be stopped. It'll only begin." Outside, distant voices scraped the stillness, low murmurs of men returning to their hunt. Taina's gaze darkened with calculation. "We must move him. Here is too close, and our walls are thin." Nantan nodded, rising slowly to her feet, muscles taut beneath the cloak that wore the dust of countless years. "I'll find another refuge, one even the winds won't betray." Taina scanned the rocky terrain beyond the cave. There is a ravine not far, concealed by the red thorn. It offers shelter, though it chills bone and soul. Eli gave a painful cough, fingers trembling on the ground. "I've no strength left to run." His gaze flicked to Taina, wary but desperate. "If they find me, kill me. It won't just be my blood spilled. It will be sparks on dry brush that can't be quenched." Taina knelt beside him, her hands rough as river stones, but careful as a sparrow's wing. "Then you'll run with us, or fall beneath their hate." The sisters exchanged a glance, a silent covenant forged in hardship and hope. Taina's presence brought a new force to their fragile alliance, though suspicion remained a constant shadow. The night deepened, a chill pressing against skin and bone, sharpening the edge of fear. Suddenly, from the distance, the indistinct pounding of horses' hooves shattered their fragile calm. Taina's head snapped toward the sound, eyes bright with urgency. She reached for an arrow at her side, knocking it with practiced ease. A breeze shifted the stillness, carrying a swift message of dread. Taina pulled from her leathern pouch a tattered scrap of parchment, the ink faint but unmistakable. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it, revealing hurried scrawls. "Offensive against the Apaches will begin at dawn. No leniency. Eli's recovery triggers a purge. All who assist will be marked as enemies. The sisters exchanged a breath caught in their throats, a silent storm gathering. "Their wrath is coming," Taina murmured, voice heavy with foreboding. "If we cannot stop them, everything we protect will burn." Nantan's gaze hardened, resolve blazing beneath the rising moon. "Then we must be the fire that eats the darkness first." Eli's eyes, fierce despite weakness, met theirs. "If they take me back, the pain you've always feared will bleed out into the world." Taina swallowed hard, the full weight of the hunt closing in like a noose. "Then we have little time, and fewer places to hide." A harsh scrape at the cave's entrance caused the three to freeze, their sanctuary pierced by the approach of enemies. The silence shattered again, the desert holding its breath in the balance between hope and ruin. With grim determination, Taina stepped forward, arrow aimed into the shadows. The next steps they took could decide the fate of more than just themselves. The fragile thread holding peace threatened to unravel in a single breath. The warning was clear and inevitable. Taina intercepted a hastily scribbled message. The offensive against the Apaches would begin imminently if Eli were recovered. The wind howled through the rocky expanse, sending sharp grains of sand across the shelter where Nantan and Eli huddled. Shadows danced restlessly on the cave's rough walls, the storm beyond gathering its fury. Rain began in spits, then fell in hard, unrelenting sheets that hammered the earth. Like a relentless drumbeat, the desert night had turned savage, and with it came isolation, both physical and unspoken. Eli shivered beneath the thin blanket Nantan had draped over him, his ragged breaths sputtering against the rising gusts. His face, pale and drawled with sweat and dirt, bore the ghosts of pain. He coughed, a ragged rasp that cut through the cold air, eyes flickering with a mixture of gratitude and frustration. "You did more than anyone else would have," he murmured, voice raw. "Back there, hiding me, risking everything." Nantan's gaze held steady, dark pools reflecting the storm outside. "Mercy is not weakness, Eli, even in a world built to break men like you and me." The crunch of thunder overhead filled the silence that tried to crawl between their words. Outside, the tempest bowed trees and tore at barren branches. But inside the cave, time slowed to a heartbeat. Eli's fingers trembled as he reached up, gathering strength to touch Nantan's hand. "I owe you more than I can speak, but there's more than just my life at stake," he said, voice dropping. "I ran because I saw what those colonists do to your people, how power twists their minds and shreds justice. My past, it's stained with secrets that, if revealed, will ignite old fires no one can contain." Nantan's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in the fierce weight of knowledge. "We have all burned, Eli. My people's scars run deeper because those fires never truly die." She paused, breath clouding in the cold air. "Why should I trust a man whose secrets could drown us both?" The question hung heavy, shadows settling like dust around them. Eli's jaw clenched, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his guarded facade. "Because I want to stop the bloodshed too. The corruption I witnessed, it's bigger than me or you. If they catch me, they'll crush the last hopes for peace." Lightning flashed, illuminating the cave's cramped space, and revealing the lines etched by pain on his weathered face. In that brief blaze, a fragile understanding sparked between them, a bridge over the chasm of mistrust. The roar of wind drowned out further speech, but the silence that followed was ripe with unspoken promises and fears. Nantan tightened her hold on the makeshift bandage wrapped around his ribs, the act a quiet vow of protection against the storm that raged both outside and within. Hours passed like weary footsteps on broken ground. The storm showed no mercy, thrumming against the rock with relentless intent. Time blurred, and Eli's strength ebbed and flowed beneath the steady ministrations of Nantan's touch. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the cavern's entrance, a figure cloaked in darkness and silence, stepping lightly over scattered stones. Nantan stiffened, her hand instinctively slipping beneath her cloak to the curved knife at her hip. Eli's eyes widened with a blend of panic and weariness. The stranger's face remained hidden beneath a heavy hood, voice low and cold as the night itself. "Your mercy has drawn attention," the figure said, words sharp as obsidian. "They'll come faster now. They do not forgive sheltering what they hunt." Nantan met the gaze concealed behind the hood, unflinching. "Who sent you?" A pause stretched taut, as if the wind itself held its breath. The figure's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "We aim to preserve balance, but some fires must be quenched before they consume the land." Eli's breath hitched, tension coiling thick as the storm outside. "What do you want from us?" "A message," the stranger said, removing a folded scrap of weathered parchment from beneath the cloak. "And a warning." They tossed it onto the dirt floor near Eli's injured foot. Nantan picked it up, unfolding carefully. The ink was smudged but legible. "Healer of the fallen, beware. Aid breeds wrath. The circle tightens. Their net draws close, and mercy will be punished by blood. Move swiftly or be consumed." The weight of the words settled like cold stones on Nantan's heart. She knelt beside Eli, her voice a raw thread of resolve. "We are marked now. This path we walk is sharper than any blade." Eli pressed a trembling hand to the warning, eyes dark with resignation. "If they come, we may not have time to hide." A sudden gust swept through the cave's mouth, carrying with it the distant sound of hooves, faint but growing. A chorus of harsh voices followed, thick with malice and purpose. Nantan's muscles tensed, her mind racing over the web of dangers closing in. "We cannot stay," she said with urgency, her words carving the fragile stillness. "The storm was meant to be our shield, but now it betrays us." Eli struggled to rise, every movement a battle against his fading strength. "Where would we go?" Tension flickered across Nantan's face, memories of hidden ravines and forgotten trails flashing briefly. "There is a hollow beyond the foothills, where the earth buries secrets. It's cold, but safer than this cave." The storm's roar surged again, rattling the stone above. Time was bleeding out, each breath a precious commodity. Before the first word of dissent could form, the figure in the shadows stepped back toward the opening. You have until dawn to vanish from these lands, or face the reckoning." With that, the cloaked messenger melted into the storm's embrace, leaving behind only the echo of threat and the tangible pulse of looming peril. Nantan's gaze locked with Eli's, fierce, unyielding. "We move at first light." Until then, she placed a steady hand on his forehead. "We gather strength, because tomorrow, everything changes." The hot desert wind bore down hard as Nantan, Eli, and Tana crouched within the tangled brush near the rocky outcrop they'd fought fiercely to claim. Clenched teeth and quick breaths marked the aftermath of their bloody skirmish, a chaotic blur of gunfire and desperate maneuvers that had left both pursuers and defenders gasping in the dust. Blood mingled on scorched earth, the scent of gunpowder and sweat hanging heavy in the air. Nantan's eyes burned with fierce resolve, her lips pressed tight against the pounding of her heart. The ground beneath her was stained with the sacrifice they'd all made. Wounds raw, limbs trembling. Yet the fire in her remained unextinguished. The ragged breaths of her sister, Tana, mixed with Eli's shallow panting, each one a testament to the price of fragile trust forged beneath the endless sky. "Those bastards thought they could break us," Tana whispered, voice sharp with lingering anger. "But they don't know what it means to survive in these lands, to fight for something more than vengeance." Eli's gaze flickered between the sisters, his own wounds hindering his strength, but his spirit refusing to yield. "You fight smarter than any man in those hills," he admitted hoarsely, a flicker of admiration shadowed by pain. "Your people's knowledge, it's more than just cunning. It's survival stitched into every fiber." Nantan pulled a strip of cloth from her satchel, hastily wrapping it tighter around a deep gash on her arm. The sting was sharp, but nothing compared to the ache in her chest. A silent battle between hope and the creeping gloom of distrust. "We're united, but the road ahead twists darker," Nantan said, voice low, yet resolute. "Some inside the tribe, and even among the colonists, would sooner watch us die than accept this alliance." Her eyes hardened. "The blood we spilled today only stirred those embers. They fear change, and will do anything to snuff it out." Tana's jaw tightened. "The old grudges run deep. Even family can be poisoned by suspicion." Eli shifted painfully, gripping the earth beneath him, eyes shadowed with the weight of his burden. "I know what they want, to ignite a war that feeds their greed and blind hatred. But not all share that thirst. Some within both worlds long to break the cycle, to build rather than burn." Nantan turned her gaze upward, to the broken horizon, bleeding bruised purples and fiery embers. "Those voices are whispers now, but they can grow or be silenced." A sudden rustle nearby snapped their attention toward the brush. Tana reached for her bow with lightning reflexes, muscles taut as a coiled snake. The night's silence was cracked by subtle footfalls drawing closer, careful, cautious, but unmistakably deliberate. From the shadows stepped a man known well to them, a trusted companion, but lately distant and sharp-eyed with secrets. His face was drawn, eyes flickering with something unreadable, a mixture of loyalty strained by hidden agendas. "You're all still breathing," he said quietly, voice rough like gravel grinding against stone. But not everyone shares the same blood in this fight. His gaze flicked between Eli and the sisters, lingering just long enough to chill the air. Nantan's fingers brushed the hilt of her knife beneath her cloak, warning, unspoken but clear. "Speak plainly." The man swallowed, a flicker of hesitation passing over his features. "There are those within our own ranks who see this alliance as a threat. They've begun weaving webs, lies, betrayals. Some want to see this end before it begins." His eyes darkened. "I feared I'd be the one to betray you, but here I am, caught in the same storm." Taina's eyes narrowed, suspicion sharp as a hawk's talon. "So where do your loyalties lie now? With us, or with the shadows that whisper death?" The man's gaze bore into theirs, torn but resolute. "I want peace, but peace built on lies will crumble. You need to watch your back, Nantan. The enemy is no longer just outside." A cold pulse ran through the group, the bitter sting of betrayal slicing through their fragile victory. "Then we face an enemy both unseen and unforgiving," Nantan said, voice cold steel, laced with determination. She rose, muscles tight with the weight of leadership, the lines carved by hardship evident in her stance. "We settle this, not with blindness or fear, but with the fire that builds from truth." Eli struggled to his feet, wincing, yet standing taller amid the gathering tension. "I won't be the spark for another war. But if the trail festers close, we'll have no choice but to fight the shadows within, before the ones outside reach us." The night deepened, stars swallowed behind thickening clouds that promised rain or worse. The distant echo of hooves warned of pursuers regaining ground, persistent and merciless. Taina gathered her bow, eyes scanning the tree line as the wind whispered secrets none wished to hear. "Our path narrows. Every step forward risks their wrath, and trust wears thin like the desert grass underfoot." Nantan's gaze hardened against the encroaching dark. "We have no choice but to stand and root out the poison before it kills us all." She looked at Eli, voice fierce yet gentle. "If this alliance is to live, we must face not only our enemies, but those who hide behind our own masks." A sudden crack echoed, a snapped branch, too deliberate for chance. The man who had warned them stiffened, reaching for his weapon. "They're closer than we thought." In that breath, the fragile thread holding their hope stretched tight, a line between survival and ruin. Nantan's voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with warning and promise. "Betrayal comes from within. Watch your shadows." The desert held its breath, and fate waited silent on the edge of the coming storm. The weight of betrayal pressed heavily on Nantan's chest as she paced the rocky outcrop, the twilight casting long shadows that seemed to dance with the ghosts of unspoken fears. She felt cut off, isolated by the very choices that had kindled a flicker of hope in the harsh wilderness. Trust and mercy now corroded by whispers and hidden knives. Eli sat nearby, his body battered but his eyes sharp, reading her like the shifting patterns of desert wind. Despite the growing distrust, it was his steady presence that anchored Nantan's resolve. He spoke with quiet determination, a voice rough but sincere, bridging the widening gap between wariness and alliance. Whatever poison seeps among your people, I refuse to let it poison what we've built in these sands." Nantan halted, the tension in her shoulders easing only a fraction. "Hope is a fragile thing, Eli. Easier to crush than to carry." Taina stood apart, her gaze distant, but haunted by shadows only she could see. Memories clung to her like battered armor, ghosts from battles past and losses deeply carved. She wrestled silently with the shadows within, those that whispered of vengeance and survival, doubt and loyalty. Her lips pressed into an unyielding line, determination warring with the storms inside her heart. The sisters exchanged a glance weighted with unspoken meaning. Despite their differences, a shared purpose bound them, a legacy born in quiet defiance and bloodied compassion. Together, they sketched their fragile plan amid the waning light. Nantan's voice was low, steady as the desert wind that never ceased. "We must protect what started here between us, even as the world threatens to tear it apart." Eli nodded, grim and solemn. "Then we stand, even if the ground beneath us cracks open with betrayal." Suddenly, the night air shattered with the sharp crack of twigs, too deliberate to be chance. Taina's bow was drawn in an instant, the taut string humming a deadly promise. Muscles coiled like a panther ready to strike. From the shadows stepped a man known, but changed. Once trusted, now shaded by secrets darker than the desert's longest night. His face was etched with conflict, eyes flickering with loyalty strained beyond mending. "You're still breathing," he said, voice rough as gravel turned by the sun. "But the war's deadliest blades come from within." Nantan's hand hovered near her knife, steady and unflinching. "Speak plain." The man's breath coughed out like dust. "There are those among us who see this alliance as a threat to the old order. They weave lies and stoke flames, hoping to burn us from the inside. Become the blade that strikes you. But," he swallowed hard, "I'm caught in this storm alongside you." Taina's gaze sharpened to a blade's edge, suspicion lacing each word. "And where do your loyalties truly lie? With us, or shadows that wish to see us fall?" His eyes locked with theirs, torn and tired but resolute. "I want peace, but not one built on deception. Watch your backs. The enemy is closer than you imagine." A bitter chill settled in the silence, the sting of betrayal cutting deeper than any wound. The fragile web of trust threatened to unravel with every heartbeat. Nantan rose, muscles taut with the weight of leadership etched by sacrifice. "We have enemies both seen and hidden. We face not only the guns outside, but knives in the shadows." Eli struggled to stand, wincing but unbowed. "I won't be the spark that lights another war. But if the rot festers within, it will consume us all before the bullets fly." The stars disappeared behind gathering clouds, the desert darkening, as if mourning what was to come. Hoofbeats echoed faintly on the edges, a grim reminder the pursuers had not relented. Taina gathered her bow, eyes scanning the tree line with practiced vigilance. "Our path narrows. Every step forward risks wrath. Trust thins like the parched grass beneath our feet." Nantan's gaze hardened against the creeping dark, fierce and unyielding. "Then we root out the rot or fall to it. If this fragile tie is to live, We must face foes both without and within. A sudden crack, sharp and unmistakable, broke the night's fragile calm. The man who had warned them stiffened, hand falling to the worn grip of his pistol. "They're closer than we thought," he whispered, eyes narrowing into the shadows that creeped ever nearer. The desert held a breath, suspended, waiting. Nantan's voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with wary truth and fierce promise. "Betrayal comes from within. Watch your shadows." Before them, beyond the rise of stones and scrub, a band of horsemen thundered, dark shapes silhouetted against the leaking silver of moonlight. The attack was sudden, ruthless, an ambush carved from desperation and hatred. Gunfire cracked, muffled by the breathless night. Arrows whistled through the air, slicing the cold. The trio dove for cover beneath jagged rocks, hearts pounding against bloodied ribs and battered flesh. Dust rose in choking plumes, mingling with the scent of sweat and gunpowder. Taina's arrow flew true, finding a pursuer's choked scream. Nantan moved with sharpened grace, blades flashing in. The moonlight as she deflected death's cold kiss. But the tide of numbers pressed, unforgiving. Eli gritted his teeth, fighting beside them despite his wounds. A ghost of his former strength, but a spirit fierce and unbroken. "Hold! For what we've built," he shouted, voice raw. "Hold or lose everything." The desperate battle narrowed, each breath a prayer, every heartbeat a defiance. Then, as the first light bled over the jagged horizon, the attackers faltered, pulled back by orders unknown, leaving behind the shattered remnants of their assault. Nantan's chest heaved, every muscle screaming. Blood dripped from shallow cuts and torn sleeves. She scanned the retreating shapes, mind slicing through the chaos, the damage, the cost. Tanya lowered her bow slowly, eyes red-rimmed but fierce. Eli sank to one knee, winded, gazing at the rising sun with a flicker of hope. "We survived, for now." Nantan met their eyes, dark and unwavering. "This fight isn't over. The world beyond our walls tightens like a noose. We must move fast, before they find us again." Her voice fell softer, yet the forest of emotion was louder than words. "There is no sanctuary left. Not here, not with shadows closing. We must flee into lands unknown." The weight of the bitter truth hung heavy in the dawn air. And then, a sudden crackling noise shattered the tenuous calm. From the east, hoofbeats surged with savage speed, an attack more brutal, more merciless, bearing down upon them. Nantan's hand closed into a fist, determination a blazing fire beneath her skin. "We run," she said, breath sharp, because in the unforgiving wilderness of the West, survival meant choosing the unknown over certain death. The storm was coming, swift, brutal, and irrevocable. The long wooden doors of the council lodge creaked as Nantan stepped inside, the weight of the desert night still clinging to her shoulders. Beside her, Eli moved with quiet caution, a man out of place, yet bound now by threads stronger than distrust. They entered the chamber, where the tribal elders sat in a circle, faces carved by years and hardened by loss. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the crackle of a small fire burning low in the center. Eyes, sharp and searching, fixed on Eli with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Some bore the cold distrust of centuries-old wounds, while others held a flicker of hope, fragile and uncertain. The eldest among them, a grizzled man named Chief Waya, leaned forward, his voice gravelly. "This house honors those of our blood. But what do we do with a stranger who brings danger upon our doorstep?" Tana stood behind Nantan, muscles tense, hands ready at her side. Her gaze never left Eli, wary as the desert hawk she was. "He carries secrets," she said quietly, "and those who hunt him want to set fire to all we hold sacred. We cannot afford to be careless." Murmurs rose like shifting sands, some demanding his banishment, others pleading for caution. The council was fractured, old scars opening anew beneath the weight of fresh fear. Voices clashed softly, the debate a tempest beneath calm exteriors. One elder, a woman with silver-streaked hair named Ahuli, spoke with measured strength. "Our people have suffered too long under the cruel hand of invaders. Yet, if this man's truth can halt the tide of war, perhaps we must listen instead of reject." Nantan met the council's gaze steadily. "I have seen his pain. I have touched his wounds, not only on his flesh, but in his soul. To turn him away now is to turn our backs on the chance for something new, something beyond the endless cycle of blood." The room tightened with tension, a breath held collectively. Tanya's hand swept nervously to the arrow at her belt, while Eli shifted uncomfortably beneath the weight of silent judgment. His voice, steady but low, finally broke through. "I do not ask for friendship or trust lightly, but I carry knowledge, plans of a strike against your people, aimed to wipe out what remains. I ask for sanctuary, not as an enemy, but as a man desperate to stop a war before it begins." A younger councilman, face hardened but eyes restless, spat disdain. "Peace with a stranger? You ask us to risk everything on the word of the one who flees like a coward." Nantan's gaze hardened like the flint she carried. "Courage is found not only in battle, but in choice. We must decide what kind of people we will be. Those who cling to hate, or those who find strength beyond it." The debate stretched deep into the night. Shadows of the past haunted every word, betrayals etched in memory, the names of fallen kin echoing with bitter resonance. Yet beneath the clamor, a faint current of possibility rippled through the room. Just as the council seemed poised to deliver their fractured judgment, a sudden rustle outside shattered the fragile peace. Heads snapped toward the doorway, alert and sharp. The winds of fate had brought unwelcome news. A scout, breathless and coated in dust, stumbled in. "A patrol rides toward the village, less than an hour away," he warned, eyes wide with urgency. "They seek the man you harbor." The room stiffened. An unspoken truth settled like a stone. The fragile decision of the council could mean survival or doom. Chief Waya's voice rang out, commanding and cold. "Prepare the defenses. We stand not just for ourselves, but for the fragile hope that dwells in the heart of this stranger's plight." Nantan stepped forward, her voice quiet but unwavering. "No matter the council's words, we protect what we have until the dust settles. We face this storm together." Eli's eyes met hers, dark pools of resolve shining through pain. Tana's silhouette sharpened in the firelight, bow in hand. ready to shoulder the coming fight. Outside, the desert night held its breath. But beyond the distant hills, the thunder of hooves grew louder. The enemy's shadows crept closer with each passing second. The whispered fate of the council fell into silence, broken only by the pounding approach of the patrol that threatened them all. The desert stretched wide and ruthless beneath the heavy sky, barren and silent but for the whispered rustle of sweat-dampened breath and the crunch of worn boots on scorched earth. Nanton stood steady, muscles coiled like the bow she carried, eyes fixed beyond the tangled brush where unexpected allies gathered. Alongside her, Eli pressed pale fingers to his raw side, pain etched deep but his spirit burning bright. Taina moved with measured grace, every muscle taut and ready as shadows pressed closer. The fragile alliance carved in blood and silence found new strength that day. Colonists tired of endless hate and native warriors bound by legacy, standing shoulder to shoulder against the storm gathering on the horizon. Around them, the land held its breath, knowing too well that the peace here was as fleeting as desert rain. We cannot fight this war alone. Nantan's voice was low, but unwavering, slicing through tension like a steady blade. Those who see only enemies will perish with old grudges. We choose now, hold fast or be broken. Eli's gaze met hers, fire flickering, despite wounds that labored beneath his shirt. I've seen greed twist men's hearts, poisoned, riddled as deep as the canyons. But there is light, in knowledge, in trust, if we can grab it before darkness devours all. Taina's eyes darkened with cautious hope. The colonists who join us, many carry scars, just like ours. They're tired of the endless bloodshed, hungry for a future where we do not watch our kin fall to hate's rope. Between them, murmurs rose among a ragtag band of settlers and Apaches alike, some with fresh wounds, others too old for gunfire, but still fierce in their resolve. They circled like wary wolves, weapons ready, hearts heavy with the knowledge that the enemy was no faceless ghost. Suddenly, a jagged sound tore through the stillness, the shatter of snat timber, too deliberate for accident. Taina's hand flew to her bowstring, muscles trembling with tension as shadows shifted in the brush. The allies froze, breath caught in throats. From the dusk stepped a man known well, but changed. A once trusted companion, now cloaked in shadows of doubt. His eyes flickered with secrets too heavy to turn away. "You're still alive," he said, voice gravel and chill. "But you tread on thin ice. The greatest dangers are no longer beyond your circle, but within it." Nantan's hand brushed the hilt of her knife beneath her cloak, calm but ready. "Speak plainly. Where do your loyalties lie?" The man swallowed the tight lump in his throat, words jagged like broken stone. "Some among our own see this fragile truce as poison, threat to old ways. They weave lies, cast shadows to choke out the light. I feared I'd deliver the final blow, but the blood on my hands is shared now." Taina's eyes narrowed, a hawk's gaze unrelenting. "So where is your allegiance? Ours, or the ghosts that wish to see us broken?" His gaze flicked between them, tired but resolute. "I want peace, but one forged from lies will." crumble before the sun. You must watch carefully. Your enemies hide not just behind guns, but in crawling darkness. A bitter chill settled over the group, like dust stirred before a sandstorm. The sting of betrayal cut deeper than any wound, fracturing the fragile hope that clung to them. Nantan's voice, weighed by hard-earned wisdom, rang out, steady as stone. We fight not only claws and rifles, but shadows sewn into our own ranks. We root out the rot, or it consumes us all. Eli pushed himself upright, pain lancing with each movement, yet determination burning fiercely. I swore I would not be the spark of another war. But if darkness festers inside, there will be no peace to find. The desert sky darkened as stars vanished behind thickening clouds. Breaths held captive, awaiting the thunder of hooves that echoed faintly in the distance, relentless, gathering. Tana drew her bow, eyes sharp as desert hawks. Every step forward risks fury, every ally tested. We stand on a knife's edge. Nantan's gaze hardened, tempering steel within fire. Then we expose the poison or drown in it. If this alliance is to live, we confront foes seen and unseen. We stand fierce together. A sharp crack sliced the night air, the snap of a deliberate branch. A man who bore the bitter truth stiffened, lowering hands to the worn grip of his revolver. They're closer than we thought. The fragile line between survival and ruin stretched dangerously thin. Gunfire exploded harsh and sudden, slicing the silent desert. Arrows screamed through cold air, a storm of red and silver carving through the black. The trio dove low, ducking beneath jutting rocks, hearts pounding like frantic drums against battered ribs. Nantan moved like shadow and flame, blade flashing in moonlight as she deflected death's cold kiss. Tana's arrows found flesh, each shot a desperate prayer against encroaching despair. Eli gritted his teeth, wounded flesh burning, fighting alongside them. A ghost wounded but unyielding. Hold! Eli's voice, raw with pain, cut through chaos. For what we've built, hold or lose everything. The brutal clash wove a desperate dance between life and death. Dust rose in choking plumes, mingling with sweat and gunpowder. Prayers whispered between bloodied breaths. As the first pale light bled over the jagged horizon, the attackers faltered, pulled back by silent orders or the weight of something unknowable. The night's violence settled into bitter silence. Nantan gasped, chest tight with burning exhaustion. Blood mingled with sweat along her torn sleeve. Her eyes sought the retreating shadows, mind sharp amid swirling chaos. Tana lowered her bow slowly, eyes blazing despite weariness. Eli sank to one knee, wind-beaten, gazing towards sunrise with flickers of fragile hope. We survived, for now. We survive to fight again, Nantan whispered, voice carrying the weight of desert winds. But no sanctuary remains, not here, not under these endless skies. The shadows close. Suddenly, a new thunder shattered fragile calm. Hoofbeats screaming brutal on the dry earth. Faster, closer. The second wave descended swift and merciless, bearing death wrapped in speed. Nantan's fist clenched, resolve flashing fierce like sudden lightning. "We run," she said, breath sharp and sure. Because in the wild, where mercy meets gunfire and old wounds never truly heal, survival is the cruelest fight of all. The coming storm would sweep all, and only those who dared flee into the unknown could hope to see the dawn. The desert held its breath as hoofbeats turned into thunder. The silence after the battle brought more questions than answers. The dawn stretched wide across the desert, pale light seeping through the distant hills your hoofbeats had thundered moments before. The air hung heavy with the scent of smoke and dust, the sharp residue of battle that had carved its scars into the cracked earth. Nantan stood at the ridge, gaze steady, her dark eyes tracing the horizon as the restless wind teased strands of her hair. Beside her, Eli leaned on a sturdy branch, ribs aching but spirit unbroken. Taina shifted near the scraggly bushes, bow slung low but ready, muscles taut from the fight still pulsing through her veins. The storm of violence had passed, but its echoes lingered, settling cold and deep between them. The fragile alliance born of whispered mercy and desperate hope now bore the weight of choices that stretched far beyond their small circle. Nantan's voice broke the silence, low and unwavering. "The fires we started will not easily be quelled, but the ground beneath these sands holds new promises. Those who once saw only enemies may now glimpse a path beyond the rage." Eli nodded, pain flickering behind his dark eyes. "I have carried secrets that could have torn us apart. Yet here we stand, not as strangers, but as guardians of a fragile peace. The wounds we bear are deep, but they remind us why this must endure." Taina stepped forward, her voice fierce under the desert light. "The Council's division has not died with the night, but the decision is made. We shelter those who seek not war, but understanding. Our people and theirs must learn this too." The quiet stir rose from the few rugged settlers and warriors huddled nearby. Broken by battle, but bonded by purpose, they gathered, shoulders squared against the uncertain future. Their faces bore the grit of survival, hope mingling with scars and weary resolve. The desert's expanse seemed to contract around them. As if listening, Nantan glanced at Eli, a steady flame kindling between them. "You have become more than a man saved. You are a symbol of what is possible when silence meets compassion." Eli's lips curved in a faint, weary smile. "And you, a bridge between worlds long divided by fear and bitterness." The early sun kissed the canyon walls with amber light, painting the rugged stones with warm grace. Slowly the air shifted, quiet breaths of renewal threaded through the crisp morning. Nantan felt the weight of her ancestors settle gently upon her shoulders, not as chains, but as a mantle of courage. "We have survived the fury of hatred, the sting of betrayal," she continued, voice rich with determination. "But now the future demands we walk forward, not as enemies, But as kin bound by choice, Taina nodded, eyes scanning the path ahead. There will be those who resist. The old wounds are stubborn, yet every step we take away from vengeance is a step toward lasting peace. Eli straightened, despite the ache pulsing beneath his skin. The road will be long and the shadows deep, but if courage stirs in even a few hearts, that light will guide us. Nantan dropped to one knee, gathering a handful of desert sand, letting it sift slowly through her fingers. From these very grains, we build our promise. Scattered alone, weak and forgotten, but together, strong enough to shape new lands. She rose, turning to face the small gathering, assembled beneath the rising sun, their faces marked by exhaustion and hope alike. We honor those who fell, those who fight still, and those who dared to forge a different path. This is our covenant. Taina stepped beside her sister, instilling the moment with the fierce pride of the warrior, tempered by the soft grace of sisterhood. They called me hard, unyielding, but the fiercest blade is one forged in love and loyalty. The settlers stirred, voices rising in quiet acknowledgement, acceptance born from shared struggle, from the breaking down of walls forged by misunderstanding. Eli limped forward, his voice steady, though burdened by past doubt. I will carry the story of this day beyond these hills, a tale not of hatred, but of mercy that refused to be silenced. If my survival sparks that story, then my pain is not in vain. Nantan extended her hand, an invitation, a vow. Eli grasped it, their fingers entwined in a gesture that transcended race, history, and pain. Two souls stitched together against the vast canvas of the West. The wind stirred once more, gentle now, as if blessing their pact. Around them, the land breathed, ancient and watchful. In the distance, the last shadow of those who hunted them faded, swallowed by the sprawling desert that bore witness to countless stories of loss, of love, and of hope reborn. Nantan's gaze lifted to the sun, climbing higher, its golden light spilling over the horizon like a promise etched in fire and stone. We walk forward, she said quietly, not because the past is forgotten, but because the future is worth every scar. Taina's bow hung relaxed, her eyes softening as she looked toward the fragile circle of allies gathered here. Eli took a slow breath, feeling the pulse of a new world in his veins. The desert, once a silent witness to pain and fury, now embraced the nascent season of understanding. As they moved together down the rocky trail, footsteps steady on the sunlit earth, the bonds forged in silence and sacrifice held firm. For in the vast wilds of the West, amidst scars old as time, a single act of compassion could indeed change everything.